Wow, after hearing the questions and the first talk here, I ought to set perspective for you here. I'm going to tell you my academic background in nature. It started in 1960, okay? I was a sophomore in high school and took a class in biology. I do remember we dissected a worm. That's all my background in this. I don't remember much of it, as you can tell. So what we're going to talk a little bit about this evening is how to get lessons from watching the flora and the fauna as they live their lives and react to the changes around them, and learn to find them, and then learn what their idea is. And photography, for me, is key, because even all the evolving resources to finding the ID, and we'll be talking some about that. And once you learn the ID, then you've got a chance to learn better, to see how they live. And you can ask others, read, find them again, and document and present to teach to others and to reference later on. Preparing documentation as a chemical engineer or a very amateur nature person in presenting to others is how you learn. And usually 50% of what I learn about the topics are trying to prepare to tell somebody else about them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go kind of fast through some of these. There's over 300 slides here, so if I skip through a few, you don't have to worry that, oh, somebody said this was informal to get up and get some lunch. It's also okay to get up and walk out if it's just not fitting with the category here. Okay, but when you're trying to spot stuff first, concentrate on what is there, turn off your filters. We all tend to tune things out, have to watch that. Take someone else with you and repeat the same trails, reverse the direction, get a different point of view of it.
John, can we get you to go by the microphone?
I think you can. Does it sound better there? Thank you. I haven't often, usually my audiences are about a dozen people or something like that. I haven't had to use microphones. I can yell at them. Okay, so what are these animals or critters or whatever doing? What are they seeing? What are they thinking? Are they after about food or fleeing or mates or shelter? And what attracted your attention to them? A little bit also, I wanted to set my perspective on problem plants at Bluebonnet Swamp. And I'm not yet a believer or an understander for sure of pure native plant philosophy. Many contradictions in my observations are not yet resolved. So I went and looked it up. This thing came out, became a slide just yesterday when I looked up term invasive species. I wanted to jump not quite that fast. Is a species that is non-native to the ecosystem under consideration. Non-native. Non-native, he isn't here, he isn't in Baton Rouge, he isn't in Zeeland, Michigan, is he in Texas? Man, I don't know how you decide all that. So here's mine. I'm sitting there watching things happen around me for about 25 years now at Bluebonnet Swamp. And who are the bad guys? Chinese privet, man, he's bad. Very few redeeming features. Elephant ears, I saw him come in while I was here. He hasn't left yet. LSU has studied him for 15 years. Maybe they killed the plant, but they don't go away. And then you go on down to some of these others, though. Various ones have some yays and boos. What if I went down and made myself a list of non-native ones and at the swamp, but they don't do anything? Ardesia, At Frenchtown in Baton Rouge, a terrible invasive species. Some of these others, we're going to talk. Whoa, hit the wrong one. Oh, now I'm going to need help. I'll just mention it and we'll come back to it. I like lantana. And it's not supposed to be any good at all. I'm going to tell you a few good points at it. And I'd like to know why, when he's not invasive where he is, why do I have to think of him as bad? Good, thank you. I'm thinking that I'll get further along the line, but just getting there, watching it at Bluebonnet Swamp, I don't get the idea that lantana is bad. I can get it reading, but boy, there's some nice things about them. So now we're going to take a little look at finding things and then deciding who are they, and that once you know who, what tools do you use to learn about them and find something fun about them, interesting about them, or maybe how to contribute to science about them. And remember, I had mentioned before, but probably skipped over here, also think about what are they seeing. Sometimes they're very young. They may not be seeing with much experience yet. Sometimes they don't want you to see them, but they might want to see a little bit about you and talk a little bit about you. Crawfish. A lot you could say about them, except, man, they're expensive and nobody's got any right now. Another one peeking out, wondering what we're going to do with him. Huh, maybe he's not really seeing me with those eyes. What do you think? Those guys went through a drought we'll talk about. These guys are looking over their shoulder too. We're probably as hard on them. Which are his real eyes here? How is he watching me? Probably something like this guy. He's got fake eyes, and look at that real eye. How much is he seeing with that? Some of them look pretty good when they're looking around. Some of them like to be seen, even throw a little light on the subject. Or snort back at you. This one you might hear it before you see it. How about if they're looking at you 3 at a time and then compare notes? These are the kind of things. Oh, how about this? Did you ever have a fungus look at you before? Look at that. You think an owl can look any better than that moth? Another young one looking back at us, and we've studied a lot on birds. There's been a lot of bird banding. Now, didn't God spend way too much time on this? If he's trying to fool somebody with that kind of eye, why does it need that much detail? Whoops. Well, we'll go on. And we get to see a lot of mammals. This one is a rat, and he's looking cute. And wow, that could be an evil look. Or it helps you see if you could look at the detail of all those feathers of what's going on there. Okay, photography is the key to finding an idea in all eras of the evolving resources, where finding IDs are from people, books, Facebook, Google, iNat, where there's artificial intelligence. I've had different cameras all the way back to film days, and almost wore out it and stopped shooting until out came digital cameras. So this is about the same time I started in Bluebonnet Swamp and had an aha moment or two, because I could shoot with these things. That's 1/3 of a second, and I didn't have it on a tripod. I was just standing there. Digital photography, instant feedback, give luck a chance, take as many shots, and then look at if you got a good one or it was doing something fun. And it used to cost you 50 cents a shot. Now it only costs you the first time to get the equipment and then have a place to display it. And then maybe even make it a fancier display. Bluebonnet Swamp really did nice to me to start doing that. And then my brother came walking around with me and said, I can't see the swamp. It's all these darn invasive species. Did I say that privet was a bad one over here? It's a bad one. It was. So that you don't see much swamp in that scene, but you can cut it down. And sometimes you can get help in cutting it down. But you also get help planting it again. So here's some LSU students helping pry them out, helping cut them down. More prying and chopping, and you can have a pretty big gang, but try to get it out by its roots. And then along came, how about some chemical herbicides to use? And then almost as this was really grabbing on, along came Roundup. Actually, it was there. Along came people worried about Roundup. And all of a sudden, if they were like LSU or even BREC, you didn't, for the liability, you didn't let people use this stuff. And it stopped. I didn't see it for years. 2 months ago, I found out how wild it is being used. So I had to look it up here. According to the EPA, there are no risks or human health from current uses of the stuff. Contrary to the EPA, World Health Organization says that they concluded it's probably carcinogenic to humans based on animal studies. And yet Bayer had to offer $10 billion to do it. Monsanto was bought out by Bayer. That Roundup just got really bad. I need to get caught back up of how do people use herbicides now again. Around me, they weren't. And so it was all that prying and pulling again. And it only works part-time. So these shots have been showing you how my camera equipment evolved through the years and added on. So unattended cameras like trail cameras or video cameras on a tripod for 3 hours until the battery ran out, watching owls and prothonotary warblers. And now this is kind of my collection of stuff, not counting tripods and more flashes and this kind of stuff. And do you see what got the special attention over there? Nowadays, smartphones are taking over photography, especially for the kind of amateur nature stuff that we're doing. I can, with my good stuff, still do some things. I can certainly do telephoto better than they can. I can still do macro better than most of them, partly because they haven't figured out how to focus on what I want yet. But they're getting there. And that AI is really helping them develop the pictures, and then you can pass it all around. We want to talk Bluebonnet Swamp. There's 2 features we have to understand clearly. One, it's an island surrounded by Baton Rouge, and its water source is a small watershed, so it doesn't have springs or anything. Can you see the swamp there? It's all different kinds of plants and so on that stand out in any aerial photography. And its watershed, you can kind of see that if you look real close there of what the watershed looks like. It's feeding in here and going down that way. And that's all the water that is, and it will flow out. And it does flow out, and especially last year. We'll see a little bit about that thing. Somehow I can't make this thing work. Get on here. Page down, do you work? I'm stuck again.
What are you trying to do?
It's stuck. It's stuck. It's on pause there.
I should be able to click and move it. It's not moving.
I'm not sure what their clicker situation is. So slide 83.
Okay.
You good?
Yep.
Great.
Okay. we'll hope that it lasts a little while. So Bluebonnet Swamp flows on out into the Gulf of Mexico after it gets through with getting across Highland Road. Here's how it evolved, being around in the middle of Baton Rouge now. 1941, did you see it said that was a secret because that was in the middle of the war and you didn't pass around aerial photography. But watch the farmland disappear into subdivisions as it goes on through these sequences. That's Bluebonnet Boulevard coming in there without any pavement yet. And then this is just 5 years ago. Now there's the swamp just a little bit in there. And all of the canopy cover has stayed the same, but the grass and open area has changed into urban area. So you can imagine how much that's changed and how fast the water as it comes down goes through it now. And it's awesome. So some of the time it's low, and some of the time it gets a little bit of rain, and sometimes it's a little pretty on a photograph, and sometimes it covers the boardwalks at Bluebonnet Swamp, even for younger people. And as it goes back down again, birds congregate all around there. And can you see what they're eating? They're getting some little fish because they can get at them. And so can the snakes. And I don't even feel bad when I watch it anymore, even though these little guys are fun to watch them and they're cute, but the water keeps going out and they can't swim in mud and sand. And alligators aren't there because they can't find food big enough for them to eat. They could survive that drought, but you can see them in the exhibits in the swamp center. So I'm going to show you a couple of water level illustrations of how much it can change. This is an elephant ear corral I made to watch the elephant ears there, and it has a stick in it. It's about 41 inches high, and it has a trail camera taking pictures every hour. So get a little feel for what's going on, and there's been a lot of interesting studies we did on it. Nearby at Bayou Fountain, there's a water gauge, and I want to get one for the swamp awful bad, but so far I can't get their interest. But here is an example where it really shot up of where the swamp is flowing into. And here a little bit is our gauge again. So the gauge is over here, and this is where the corral is. And this is where the water's coming in. And so this is what it saw one day. So we're going to watch here 18 hours in big steps. But can you see where the thing was? Here you can't see it. You don't know which. There it is. Just the tip is poking out. Now here it's coming back. So that much water change in just 18 hours. So, and then we had this drought here this past year. There was not a cup of water in the swamp for 3 months. Not a cup. Not front, not back, not this side, not that side. And then it refilled in 1 hour. One end to the other end and both sides. This is an example of pictures that I took with my cell phone that are in 2 locations where there was no water one day, and the next day there's the water, and other data showed me that that happened in 1 hour's time. Let's take a look at how that might affect a critter at the swamp. This is a rare butterfly that has a couple of points we want to make, but it was studied first in about 2000 by Gary Ross, and then it disappeared after 2008 until we saw it again in 2002, and we saw it in 2003. We don't yet know if it passed through all that drought stuff, though. This is its host plant, and its host plant wants to grow right at the edge of the swamp water. And every time it floods, how well do you think eggs survive underwater? How well do you think caterpillars survive underwater? They probably don't. In fact, they don't. By the way, before we leave it, this is what our special butterfly looks like that we're going to try to get you to watch for. Now let's see, let me go backwards. He has piano keyboard across them. Can you see the piano keyboard there? So don't confuse them with these guys. They don't have a piano keyboard, but they look very much like them. And now Gary Ross has written a more recent article in Natural History not too long ago. That's still this month. Okay, and he wrote one in a couple of months ago in a real fancy technical one that most of you guys wouldn't probably be reading. But now we have it better showing all parts. I've only seen eggs and I've seen adults. I've never seen caterpillars. I've never seen chrysalis. And neither have many other people. So here, though, he, for you guys, is describing better what the host plants can look like. And I'm mostly just going to show you this now that he talks about it, even in the Natural History article, so that in a way that you can understand and around some of the big words I can understand of what are some of the host plants. And on this one, it'd be fun to see. I think some of these are not native plants. They are often used in hummingbird gardens and probably other pollinator gardens. But that's where Gary thinks a lot of these butterflies may hang out in bad times. And so, but some of those host plants are native, so should we close our eyes? Or if a family of a native is not a concern, are they okay, or are they going to be a concern? That's some of the stuff I don't know. But we'd like to, if you do happen to see them in any fashion, report them. And INAT is the best way to add to science, but so are a lot of the Facebooks. So a lot of the kind of things you can learn by posting and talking back and forth and waiting for the right person to come on. There's a lot of fluff talk on Facebooks too, but these are, we'll talk about them later. So maybe a Seminole might be at a pollinator garden or a hummingbird garden that you are watching for them, and all of a sudden this is there and you didn't even see it and didn't know you should care. So getting the idea of what you saw is the key to learning more about it. And in the old days, we had books. Cindy and I just moved to St. James Place, which is kind of a evolving retirement home to a nursing home eventually or whatever. We still had all kinds of books. And we used to go to the library, and you would read the library, and you'd have to flip page after page after page with your picture in front of it, trying to find out what you had. And of course, you might be walking past the flower. You guys probably know this, and we'll come back to it. I walked by this thing and kept waiting for it to open up because I never saw any petals till I took a close-up picture and said, hey, it's growing them anyway. And Dave's Garden, before there was even Facebook, told me about it. And by the way, I popped up that the answer came from frostweed in Arlington, Texas, and you might see that later on again in this. Somebody probably knows, because I know you talked frostweeds before this year. So this is the part that really astounded me that I learned from Bug Guide, who was long my really go-to site to learn about bugs. And I didn't know what I was seeing here. Turns out it was a wingless female tusk moth on her cocoon laying eggs. And once I read more about it, it really set women's lib right on its tail. So typical of a tussock moth, they enclose. That means they come out of the cocoon, they send out pheromones to call the males. They're usually ready to lay eggs soon after mating. The eggs in the cocoon may be covered with a foamy protectum under the entire process. I maybe let you miss that. The entire process from enclosure to egg laying was completed in 24 hours. That's how long a female lives. wow. That's some of the fun I like about some of the things that you can learn at this level. I was asked to speak to a junior high class, and next door at the same time, Danny Heitman was talking about Audubon prints. Maybe a few of you know about his book that he wrote when Audubon was at St. Francisville. And so I decided to talk about, could we still see those birds that Audubon saw in 1821? But because I was coming from Bluebonnet Swamp, I wanted to talk about more about birds. And I decided to find other things on the prints that we would have at the swamp, so I would have a little broader insight to pass along. And part of Audubon Days is, and this is just out in the last few days, I just put this up 3 days ago into the handout. Audubon Day is set at LSU at Hill Memorial Library once again. Now, I really wanted to know this. I've seen this, and I liked that people can go to it, but I wanted to see it for another reason. So if you followed that thing, this comes up, and then a little bit later comes up. The harder part for me to talk about is that it talks about recently Audubon has rightly come under increased criticism for his relationship to slavery, Native Americans, environmental practices, and then it gives you a lot of links on that. Because you'll see in a minute, I've used this Audubon stuff a lot, and I don't know how to totally come to grips with the whole Audubon. I know he was a good naturalist and a good artist, and that's how I've used this. And not only was there a nice place that just went by where you can get the Audubon prints online, and you can get another book that tells you how the names that he called them fit with the names today. Probably doesn't have the changing names of the way they're going through it again now. Yeah. But I never knew before, until a friend of mine told me, that Audubon wrote 5 volumes of books that 3 or 4 pages on each print, he's talking about the other things on the thing that were around the birds at that time. Boy, did that fit in with what I wanted to do. And you'll see some. This is the way they show those prints. So it's actually this kind of thing. There's Cindy taking a picture. They use white gloves on the guy turning these manuscripts. And Cindy even got her picture in Wall Street Journal on it. I have 60 Audubon prints that I did my little thing with it that followed through with it with the other ones. And because of all the other hooey, I hardly know what to do with them. But here I'm going to show you a few of them. Getting the idea of what you saw is a key to learning about it, and help from Facebook. And it's not just any Facebook. By the way, I have a Facebook that has only 3 friends on it, and they taught me how to get on Facebook. So if you ask for a friend, I won't put you on. But I go to these other sites, including yours, and ask questions that I've learned will fit here well, and they'll eventually answer questions. So that's been one of my key things for learning, and has largely taken the place of Bug Guide in Dave's Garden, and not totally of books, but mostly for finding the ID. They even have winter hummingbirds. And then you Google, and you Google, and you Google all fuzzy if you want to confirm and learn more and ask better questions and cycle back through the stuff. So I wanted to show you one where I tried that here, and it was, did ever attractive sheen rainbow colors show on the surface of the water this time of year? But I worked in the oil industry. I don't want to show people pictures of that scum showing up there. I was hoping it was something else. So I Googled and I Googled, and I found something. And here it was. Somebody from Tulane named Bob Thomas had found it, written about it, and said just how you do it. Stir it up a bit and it gets flakes instead of just smears and back out. And then somebody popped up where I posted it on Facebook and said, hey, Bob Thomas, once again, your nature notes educate. And guess who it was? Maybe she'll be around tomorrow.
I think so.
Yeah, I thought she would be. But now I dare talk about it and show pictures of this prehistoric bird I found floating in the water at Bluebonnet Swamp. Or how about this one? Do you people from New Orleans know what this one is? I think it's Blue Dog, don't you? And now, I think everybody here must know it, but I just recently, in the last few years, a master naturalist taught, SEEK is really taking over plant identification. And it's free, you can get it on your phone, you don't have to go all the way if you don't want to, all the way to the sky with your data. But it's one of the best examples I know of that artificial intelligence can do good. It can work. I don't give iNaturalists very much credit for how much response you get when you post something from the other people on it. But boy, if you're walking through what it says might be a good possibility that it is, that's helpful. And then you add to it what somebody taught me is you go up to some of those people that have identified a lot of them and said, hey, what do you think? Is this that one? And get more specific, and you can go. And then some of the stuff for you guys to use for the science part of it, there is data built in there that because they have it with the GPS data and all this other stuff along with it, the only one thing they do terrible at. How many people write a comment about if they found a butterfly, they say it was on this host plant, or these were the plants, and they don't write any comments there, they're just putting data there. But the data there is pretty powerful, and the artificial intelligence is. I have to back up just a bit again, because I wanted to talk about an Audubon print and how we used it in a little bit more detail. And so here's the print. It's a white-eyed vireo, and my question was going to be, do we have them at the swamp? And yep, I already knew we did have them. And the bird banders had one holding in their hand, and I could get right up to it and get every wrinkle at it. We could luck out and find a bird's nest with a white-eyed vireo in it, and I'd get pretty close to it and look at that nest. I didn't get to watch him build it, but you can picture what that must be. That's all spider webs. He's almost like a hummingbird's nest. So then I also put a trail camera on him, and he's bringing food to the mom sitting on the nest. But then at night, look what's coming up the branch over there. Oh, shit. And look at the dad when he brings in the worm the next morning. Did you see anything sadder? Oh, man. Let's go back and look at the picture if there's something else we could watch. Cindy saw this while they were turning the prints because it was one of our favorites. A spider. A smiley-faced spider, we called it. We don't know the scientific name, by the way, but somebody can pipe it up if they want. But they come in neat colors as well as a nice form. Many of you are too young to know what a CD looked like, but they make a nice web. And the colorful ones, if you're the first one out on the trail, you can try that test of M&M wants you to do. Do they melt in your mouth or do they melt in your hand? You'll walk right into the darn things. And that's not the only spider there is around. So we can take Audubon's print and follow the trail a little bit. And there's another kind of spider that's pretty neat. Oh, then they're neat. There's a whole series that goes with this. But I didn't want to miss this part. This is about a spider who's the prey instead of the predator. And this guy does it. And oh, does he does it. He feeds on common house spiders, and he feeds on the kids, and he has two techniques to do it. He kind of stalks them and stabs them with a real long thing, and he uses luring. And I wish I had time to show you the video, but here he's still stalking, and he stabbed one there in this thing. But he's plucking the webs to make it feel like to the spider that it's a prey caught in it. He knows just how to play the right tune. Man, that's neat. This one, I've never seen this spider yet. So he's on my bucket list, and he has to come around. You can see my bucket ain't far from tipping over. But this would help me. He throws that little net out. Haven't seen it yet. Okay, now what plant is this? You guys might know. I usually skip this because not only is the plant controversial, so is some other stuff. So we'll see that. What is the plant? Yeah. And why is that so bad? It's got berries on it. They aren't good for me to eat, but neither is poison ivy, and the birds are going to eat it. Now you can see it here. We have 3 of these trees. They never spread. They finally cut them down. Never had any youngs come up. Had all kinds of berries. And then the other part that comes up is it's neat that it was in To Kill a Mockingbird, and that's where Scout had their swing, their house, their tree house that rested between twin chinaberry trees. But then it's difficult these days to talk about To Kill a Mockingbird, the book. Might be hard to talk about To Kill a Mockingbird. Let's try another Audubon print. So we had the scarlet tanager at the swamp, and we had male and female, and we had young ones, or immature ones, we'll say, but we had young ones too. And now what else did they say? They saw it eating a bug.
Phineas pendens.
Haha. So, but ours did too. One stayed all winter eating honeybees out of the honeybee hive, has one in its beak. And look at that, there's a stinger up there. Did you know birds know to pull out those stingers before they eat the blooming bee? Look at that guy, the tufted titmouse is pulling it out. So that was for honeybees. There's all kinds of bees, as you guys know. I heard all about it. And you know what this one is. And yet, I know we have them, but I haven't seen this stuff yet. These are somebody else's pictures off the internet. But I know we've got them because the leaf shows them. And we see the bees. I would love to see them in action. But the one that really astounds me is this. This is the muck sunflower. It was so exciting we made a corral for the bees that were coming to it. And the mining bee turned out to be what came out of the holes we were watching. And the mining bees are great for the non-science study. First of all, though, we'll point out that mining bees are not colonies, although that looks like it. They're more like suburbans. They each have their own nest, or they might have several in one like this, but they aren't really relating much to each other. But they help you know who's a male and who's a female. They both have gold covers around their eye area, and the males have the nose too. And I said they don't know each other in the holes there very much, but they know one thing to do there. So the males and females get it together. And they really can pollen up, and they have to, because to me it was astounding to learn that the extreme complexity of the pollination. The larvae of these bees can only develop on the pollen of muck flowers. Muck flowers only grow in our area mid-September to mid-November. Adults are only alive in that window of time. And they must find flowers, build nests, provision the nest with the pollen, lay the eggs. How do they know when to come out and do all that stuff? What if something shifts when the flowers bloom? What about global warming? But for me, what about, I'm not supposed to like honeybees because they're non-native, and I got to depend on every flower I want to get their own bee get to them? Oh, that would be the hard thing. This thing is really just meant for me to read it a little bit about it. So here's another one that astounded me about bees. See, here I had birds and bees, right? So this guy, I was intrigued with the flower. Maybe somebody knows the scientific name, but it's really neat to look at, and I had my macro lens on a tripod, trained on that damn thing, thinking, that's a pretty nice picture, and starting to wonder, why does that happen? And along comes a darn bee, and that sickle comes down and swipes it with pollen. So one of the mechanisms like you had there's awesome ones like that around in the world. And so here's a passion for persnickety pollination. You're watching this, you knew it already. Okay, so here's the passion flower. And this is the way they start off the day. And I thought maybe there would be more people like me that didn't know how that was going to happen. So there's a pollen pad and a stigma and where the nectar is. And there the bee is going to the nectar. Now notice how the ones that want the pollen to be on them versus the rubbers, they stay up out of the way at first because they don't want self-pollination. They want it to come from another flower. So the ones that are touching the pollen to grow the fruit don't come down till the end, and they so aren't likely to get it off the same one. Just amazing. But let's go on one. So a different plant. How many people know cup-seed? We had only a few, and this is what they look like. It's a good name for it when you take the shell of the drupe off. But why is it built this way? I can see why it's called cup seed. Why does it want to be a cup seed? The drupe doesn't look anything like a cup. And we haven't been able to. This is what the flower looks like. This is what the leaves look like. It's a vine. And a few of you might have met Charles Allen, or maybe Don Allen, or maybe even the other guy. But he describes the plant as quite a rare one. And I don't mean to try to get the answer now, but this is the kind of thing we'd be curious, what is it about that shape of that cup seed that's special? Why does it do it? I think it does it for a reason. I just don't know what it is. So another thing we did with an Audubon print, and this one I had to hunt for a mushroom in it. So it ain't all about the normal kind of plants we think and all about the bugs. It could be about this, toad on a toadstool, except I made a presentation like this that's really a frog. But somebody also made a nice piece of artwork about it. But the toads do the same thing, and I think they're after the bugs. I don't think toads eat mushrooms. But a lot of mushrooms attract bugs. That's their job. And turtles like to eat mushrooms. But ever seen a bird eat a mushroom? Ever seen a bird eat the bugs that are attracted to mushrooms? I asked Bill Fontenot. I asked Eric Johnson. They ought to know. They hadn't even thought hard about it, but once they thought about it, they didn't know that they had ever seen one, and I still don't know. But mushrooms are just fun to look at. How am I doing on time, Cindy?
We've got about 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
2 minutes, actually.
2 minutes? Okay. I might walk a little bit into your question periods. So how about purple mushroom and then a golden scruffy to go with it? I don't even need another story if I'm in Baton Rouge. These are really good ones here. Look at that. Oh man, What else do you need to know other than it's good looking? Or Cindy found this one while I was post-processing. And here it is, right at Mardi Gras time. Somebody's playing a flute, all dressed up. Doesn't he look like it? It's a gnome in the swamp, playing. So he's got a big ear, he's got a hat, he's got a beard, cuffs on his sleeves, a flute, and a robe. Ta-da-da! So ask others what they have seen lately. Tell others what you saw. How does it better than this one? How would you like a kid to show you a bird's nest mushroom? We study birds all the time, and I had never found one. And this little kid found it, and the story passed along, and we found more. And it's a fantastic one. It's fantastic just to look at. Golden chalice, maybe? But this is the funnest part. So that's why it's called bird's nest there. But then when you get to the science of it, during a rainstorm, it first gets some water in on those, and if those spores are ripe, a big drop of water can knock one out. It's got a bungee cord, and that wraps around the next plant and hangs on there and drops the spores out and around. Isn't that a neat story to think of? But it's because we learned the ID and could read more about it. Or some of the mushrooms turn their gill side up, and this one did, and I put it out on one of my Facebooks that liked it, and the guy happened to mention what it was, and he says, oh, by the way, they're bioluminescent. I made a great big letter. I had to learn how to photograph them, but now I know how to get one in there. And I had to photograph it for about 6 minutes to get the exposure to show that. And then you can read a lot about why it's doing that. We're going to slip through most of the slime mold stuff. These are not funguses. They're a whole special form of life that I only partially understand, and almost nothing. They're real tiny most of the time. Shapes are good. They go good with beer sometimes. The one I wanted to get to was this one. It comes in all kinds of forms, but in ours, doesn't that look like a frosted swamp? Or if I looked at an individual tree, a few trees in it. So who do you think would be doing that? Right, it had to be Elsa. She had to be visiting us. And we do get frost. We see her visits here. And I think I said I was going to talk a little bit about frost flowers. So now I'm going to talk about frost flowers. Here's the most common one, and that people usually know. And then we found 2 others last year. And one of them, jumping ahead here, I got to wait for some of these to go. I got a little bit hung up on how they look. Does that look like a woman or a doll's face lying in there? Now, or look how fine that frost flower can be on the petals. But not only was it this one, we discovered one on licorice weed. I didn't even know what licorice weed was. It wasn't in bloom anymore. And here, who do you think told me who it was? Katrina. And boy, you read that thing, and it's just the way she goes through stuff like this. Said it very simply. She must have been looking at books or something to even find this, but she found it. And then, did I mention lantana a while ago? So they make frost flowers. I haven't read much that they do it, but it did it this year again. And then we found out so does camphor weed. So now at least we know that we have at Bluebonnet Swamp 4 frost flowers. We know from friends' stories that Ardesia, which we don't have much of, but at Frenchtown it makes frost flowers. And there was one other that I heard that something called dittany, and I guess that little thing is covering up the scientific name. I don't know if we have it in Louisiana, but Arkansas has it. And if you ever wanted to know what makes this guy gave it a name, and he's by the University of Texas in Austin, just like Frost Flower telling me about the camphor weed many years ago. That thing is a hairy explanation. So let me just see what. Licking lantana, okay? I'm not saying I do, but these guys do. This is a special breed of butterfly. We don't have it here very often. Long spread of time for us. What was it eating on both times? Lantana. And then when I looked up the book, it's a state butterfly for Florida, and Florida's fabulous butterflies. It tells you that they're eating pollen. They get the pollen up in their tongue, and then send out juices, dissolve it to make the special proteins come out, and explains why zebras and other butterflies that like this, they live up to 5 or 6 months where most butterflies live only 2 weeks. And you tell me that the lantana can make frost flowers that look like that, and it can make a butterfly live that much longer, and I can't like him even though he's not spreading at the swamp. Those flowers have been there for years and years, gone a few other places, but they are not invasive. Why can't I like them? Okay, these are, I haven't done much with these. So you'll be glad to know I got there. Anybody have any questions?
We had a few questions. Christina?
What is something that you have found going back through your photos that shocked you and didn't know was in the photo?
And I didn't know it was in the photo?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I'm going to say something that, in a way, one that pops into my mind is that that female tussock moth. I had no idea what I was looking at there. And when I found out, I sure wasn't expecting that to be it. That was the no. I thought it was some kind of, something had happened to her, you know, and it was all deformed and this kind. That was the way of life. Yep.
How do you do? In your vireo nest, have you ever looked at the lichen they grow in it, the black hair-like lichen?
Haha.
I think they're called Alectoria.
Wow.
Those are
No.
cool. You should look at those.
Yes, I should.
You can see them gathering.
Now I just have to find another one to build the nest. I haven't found one doing that.
Every book, I promise.
Oh, okay. I can look in the book too. Okay, great. Thank you.
Anybody else? Dexter? And then
Is there any way that you're publishing these photos or making them available for people to look at? And if so, how are they organized? Or plans?
They aren't, most of them aren't real available. And I struggle with what is the way in the modern world to communicate things like that. I've got Flickr albums, if you've ever heard of such a thing. But, you know, I send them out of where to find them, and nobody really looks at them. I take my pictures and send them out to people that come to the swamp and so on. And if they look at them, they don't tell me they do unless I ask, and then they haven't usually looked. Some do, but I don't know of a good way other than talks like this and so on to get it out and around. It doesn't seem like people learn things the same way. I don't even see that school-age kids don't seem to want to hear things on a PowerPoint anymore. They're learning, you know, and you guys are helping too, but to get out there and do stuff, they're learning good ways, but learning this way, I think is still great, but it's not what's used very often.
Well, I can say I know your name because different Facebook posts
Yeah,
I've seen you
yeah.
associated with.
Yes.
we're recording this, Mr. Johnson, so we hope that's it. We can find Anthony on YouTube.
Yeah.
Michael?
Have any more fish come back to the swamp, Bluebonnet Swamp?
Not yet. So I think I mentioned that we just moved to St. James, so I haven't been watching, but I have friends who have, and we've been throwing out cat food every now and then because they all would come to that, those little fish. And so far, there's still none. I hope now that this thing is passed and we're getting a little more settled in to do something I did only one other time before. Some may know, if you've been to Bluebonnet Swamp, that there's a front pond at the parking lot, and they use the hose to keep it with some water, and it has some, and I've netted some and took a bucket and thrown them into the park. Normally, I would have expected by now, and I don't know why, there's some of the upstream watersheds that have ponds on them too, and usually we get stuff to wash down and do it, but restock us. But that hasn't happened this time, and I'm a believer that Bluebonnet Swamp was especially severe this year. Probably around your areas too. I thought the weathermen did a terrible job of some of the rains, and they'd act like it rained over the whole world. But some areas didn't get any, and we went through some like that during those periods. We got nothing, and they're talking about all the rain that was around. Well, that's a small watershed there. You didn't get any of some of those. And I'm surprised that I'm not hearing on some of the Facebooks, but I'm not looking close enough, I guess, of reptiles and amphibian people telling me what happened, what should have happened, what are they seeing with those. Frogs have to bury themselves in the mud and just hang out. And snakes are just hanging out, but when they got to get out, what do they got left to eat? But I think there could be much more talk going on. Some of the same thing on plants. There were some of them that just really were hurting. Swamp red maples common at Bluebonnet Swamp. Trees that were very close to each other. Some would be, I called them dead. The leaves were totally brown and just hanging there, you know, like they do when it dies before they, because nothing's pushing the leaf off, you know, like the bud underneath. But it's only about now that we're going to start to see, did some of them really die or not? But I'm not hearing anybody talk much about it, that the drought is not. I thought some of these LSU people still come and study certain stuff. I thought some of them would come by or say something, but not.
They are studying that sugar.
Pardon?
LSU's got a study right now. I'm a master gardener with St. Tammany, and they are doing a study that isn't going to come into fruition because it's about what comes back and what doesn't come back.
Yeah.
So it's going to be another, 3 to 6 months
Yeah.
before they come up with a conclusion.
It fits with what I have tried several times and just can't make it happen well enough. Must be me mostly. I want to have, why when you have Bluebonnet Swamp in the middle of a city and near all those others, why don't we have our own weather station? They make some pretty neat ones. Why don't we have some water levels and talk about global warming? Let this be data that's collected. You can send it up to the cloud these days. Anybody can go up there and get it. So I'm hoping to try another time to try to get that data collected. And I was hoping, and I have some people that I know that might help, that LSU would want to do that too. But I don't know that yet.
Is it because maybe it's small? I mean, what's the size of
Where we're usually can see it from the trails, they call it like just over 100 acres. It's a little bit bigger than that. Total BREC doesn't own the whole thing, but it's not teeny tiny. It's studyable size. There's good stuff that happens there.
In East Texas, in Lake Caddo, they have a contest to get rid of the invasive species. The one that within an hour picks more Chinese towel, they get a reward for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know any more way to do it.
There's a lot of those that are that way, but since you mentioned Chinese tallow, we've had some, and early on they even tackled some of it, but it's not a big problem. Privet is a huge problem, okay? Elephant ears, and they just came in, and there's a little bit in the back of this thing that if we had to talk about them, I would have. it's bad. Paper mulberry is bad, but they're tackling that some, but with very dedicated crews with expertise with chemical stuff of cutting it down and painting the stump. And they're making progress, but that stuff, paper mulberry, its roots go everywhere, and you're going to have to keep doing almost all the techniques. You can't do it just once. Can't do it just once.
Well, let's end on a high note, then, Mr. John. That was beautiful. You